I'm currently at my grandparents' house, and just want to welcome you all here to a little conversation for 3H Hospitality, Hope, and Hustle. And I believe we have a really unique opportunity to gain some insight into a life that was well lived. Before we jump in, is there anything you'd like to add?
Not a lot of things, because this is like a first for me to give any kind of an interview, but I think it's going to be interesting.
Many of you probably or won't know, but Grandpa's written a couple different books. One of which is called Grandpa's Journal, which is where kind of a lot of my questions are coming from. So he has written a lot down already, but speaking it may be the other side of it. Had a chance to listen to the extended version of our conversation today. We are picking off right at where Grandpa was deciding to go to Bob Jones, and this is where we'll kind of pick up our conversation as he begins his journey as a young adult, and then going through the rest of life. We'll be going through a few different topics, but feel free to jump back in and listen to that extended version to hear a little bit more of Grandpa's story, or you can check out Grandpa's Journal, which hopefully will be available online at some point in the future. So you're getting into Bob Jones. We'll touch on a few things, but something I wanted to start on, as it's not really necessarily related directly to Bob Jones. But you had the opportunity to go to Mexico for a missions trip. And as I was reading through your journal, it was one of the first things that I never heard the story before, and so I didn't know a whole lot about it. So tell us a little bit just about why you're going to Mexico, and then we'll kind of go from there.
Okay, well, I was at Bob Jones. I came in contact with a number of people who were involved in Mission Prayer Band. And the Mission Prayer Band was a time, it was extracurricular time when students on campus would get involved with different types of missionary-centered clubs. And so the Mission Prayer Band was a time when these clubs would be meeting, one for maybe Asia, another one for Latin America, and so forth. So I ended up going to the one for Latin America. And while I was there, we were invited to become part of the Christ Harvesters team, which that summer would take time off from our activities and work and so forth to travel. And I played my baritone horn, and that was my actual part of the mission team. And then we had a friend of ours who was Hernan Cortez, El Conquistador de Mexico, the conqueror of Mexico. But that was his name. His actual name was Hernan Cortez. And he was going to be the preacher. And there were four of us, I think, who traveled together. We got in one of the cars. One of the guys had a car. And we took off and went that summer to travel in Mexico to preach the gospel. And we were to go to probably 15 or 20 different cities and give testimony, sing, and so forth, and have a program in churches in Mexico. So we were excited about that. We got started with the trip, and we got about halfway through the trip, and we were traveling in southern Mexico, and we had been to several big cities, and I had a great time there preaching the gospel and sharing the word of God with people. And Hernan was from Puerto Rico, so he knew Spanish. He was brought up with Spanish, so he preached in Spanish. And the rest of us would sing songs in Spanish that we had memorized. And so we were having a great ministry as we would travel from place to place to place. One of the places we went was a little town up in the mountains, way back in the mountains, and we couldn't get back into the town except by horseback. And there's a place called El Porvenir, the future, and they gave us a place to stay that was a little building that had nothing but newspaper on the walls for privacy. They had at the foot of the mountain that we were on, they had a waterfall, and that's where everybody went to take their showers and so forth. So it was just a real fascinating trip. And so we traveled from city to city to city. We must have hit 4 or 5 cities, spent 2 or 3 days in each one. And the Lord blessed in many, many cases with people coming to know Christ. But when we were in southern Mexico, we had a tragic accident that happened down there. And our car was traveling a lonely highway. There was nobody on the highway other than an occasional car that would pass. Or you might pass some farmers along the side of the road who were taking their horse or mule to another pasture or something. But it was very, very scarce in people, very few people that you saw. But while we were traveling that highway, we came upon a bus that had stopped along the side of the road. And as we were passing that bus, a woman got off the bus and ran right in front of our car. She turned, her friends out there saw what was happening and screamed at her. She stopped and looked at us, turned around, tried to get out of the way, but did not get out of the way of the car. And the car hit her and killed her. And we were just crushed because here we had come to have a program that would offer eternal life to people. And then someone passed away because of our car hitting that person. It was a tragic time. And we stayed and tried to help the lady. And she had probably been killed instantly, it looked like. But while we were trying to do whatever we could, her sons heard about that happening and came in their car. And when they were about 100 yards away from us, they began shooting at us because they had heard that our car was the one that had killed their mother. And so we had to run for our lives, get back in the car and take off. We headed back out of town and were barely able to stay ahead of them, escape being shot. But we went to the next town and we found some place to stay and got back to Mexico City, where we found a lawyer and wanted to know what's the best thing to do and so forth. And the first question he asked was, did you have insurance? And we said, yeah, when we crossed the border coming into Mexico, had purchased insurance. Bottom line was that after we had been there a while, we were now a safe distance from where the accident had occurred. The insurance company paid a fee to the family for the loss of their mother. And when that had taken place, we were given leave to travel back home from Mexico. But it was a very difficult time. One of the things that we really were sad to have happened.
Did it change or shape kind of how you face future challenges?
Only to the extent that we saw the hand of the Lord at work, and we knew that there was no blame to be had or anything like that. Tragedies occur that you cannot foresee, and yet you have to find your way through. And it was probably one of the most traumatic things that we've ever been through. And it just shows the hand of the Lord still at work.
I think for a lot of people, at least that I talk to, when someone says that it's, God's doing it, it all works out for good, the response for a lot of non-Christians is, so you're saying that God wanted that lady to die? You're saying that God wanted this terrible thing to happen? He sounds like a terrible God. So, how do you explain that to someone that doesn't believe?
I don't know that you really can. I do know that I do think this is my take on it, and it may totally be wrong. This lady was killed in an accident she had no control of. Was she a Christian already? Probably not. Was her soul important to the Lord? I think so. And my take on it is that perhaps this was her way of the Lord making a way for her to heaven. Having never heard the gospel, perhaps, or having never had a chance to hear the gospel, that the Lord would take her on to heaven anyway. The thief on the cross said simply to the Lord on the cross that he said, Lord, remember me when you come into your kingdom. He had no way of being what you and I would say saved. He had no way of going to church, doing good works.
No baptism.
No baptism, right. And yet Jesus said, today thou shalt be with me in paradise. I think that the Lord has a way to bring people into the kingdom, so to speak, who maybe God knew that if she heard the gospel, she would have received. I mean, who knows the mind of God, or who knows how God works in mysterious ways to work miracles. But maybe the Lord knew that this woman would have received Christ if she had heard the gospel. And what about if you're going to extrapolate that and carry it on to the present day and to the future and so forth? There are millions of people who we would say have never really heard the gospel preached as we have, and who die without ever having heard the gospel preached. And probably most of them are going to not go to heaven, but maybe some will, because the Lord would look at their heart and say, if they had heard the gospel, maybe they would have been saved. And that's a big if. I mean, I have there's no scriptural background for that other than to say that God is a good God. So you have to leave things that are inscrutable to us in his hands.
Did this situation change, did this tragic event, did you have to lean on anyone in particular? Or was there a verse, or did it just take time to kind of heal, I guess you could say?
It took time to heal. And I don't know that you would say that it ever fully healed. It is an awesome thing to have happened, and hard to explain why it should have happened. As a matter of fact, the whole thing was probably a matter of inches, because when the lady turned around to run back toward the bus that she had just passed, it was only the edge of the mirror that hit her. So her car itself never really hit her, except the mirror of the car is what hit her. The car was going fast, and I'm sure she died instantly.
Obviously, that happens, and you're still in school. So now you're trying to figure out, life after that, school, which kind of brings us to this next subject being, how do we balance now kind of as parents and, for those that are still in school, balancing their education with life lessons, as in this case, a very traumatic event happened. Is it okay to spend more time working on getting through something like that and spend a little less time in school? Or should there be more of a focus on school and less on life lessons? Or when does that transition happen? Maybe it's all about school and elementary, middle school, high school. And then as I get older, then it turns to, okay, now it's life lessons. Or kind of how does education play a role in its importance versus general life lessons and life?
The life lessons never end. They begin when you're born. You begin having life lessons, things that you learn as you're brought up. Your parents are teaching you things that are critical things to you. You don't understand them as being critical, but you learn those as your parents bring you up through them. As you go from living under your parents' direction and going into your own lifestyle and so forth, you're still learning life's lessons. And if you're paying attention, you're going to continue to learn life lessons as you go on. And I think you never really stop learning life lessons. The older you get, the more some lessons develop in your life and become an important part of your life. And while the other side of the coin is that some lessons you learn become less and less important. A person may come to the point where he's learned how to make a lot of money. And as he gets older, having more money means less and less importance to him. So as in his older years, his emphasis goes away from making money to trying to win people to Christ, or to take some other direction with his life to do other things. So I think life's lessons never stop, but the emphasis on those lessons may go in different directions. And your life lesson may go off in one way and my life lesson may go off in another way. Doesn't necessarily mean that mine's any better than yours or any worse than yours, but it could be that God has a particular reason for bringing your life one way and my life another way. And I think this happens with everybody. Mm-hmm. So no two persons go through the same set of circumstances to give you the kind of character that you got. But the character principles that you learn along the way are critical. And most people never really come to the point where they see life lessons like that as being critical, making a critical difference in their life. Some people pay attention, some people don't. And to me, this is one of the tragic, I say tragic, things that's going on in our day today, that there are so many artificial influencers coming into people's lives that are relatively meaningless, but that are taking all their attention, that life after life after life is being sidetracked and or ruined by commercialism, garbage of one sort. And I call it garbage in the sense that it's basically useless input. The person who has no time to do anything except look on their phone and track down who's saying what about so-and-so, who cares about what this athlete or this movie star is doing, what difference is that going to make for eternity? And it takes your focus away from things spiritual.
Yeah, they're just distractions from your potential, whether, like you said, spiritual or just regular life in general. They're just distractions. So instead of spending time reading a new book, it's, hop on the phone and browse Instagram. I do believe that there are good influencers out there.
I agree.
Are sharing some, but just because you happen to swipe through and be listening to those doesn't mean that just by listening to them, you're therefore gaining the same information and knowledge as you would from diving into one book or listening to one podcast and actually taking the information and using it versus just, oh, that's good. Oh, that's good. Oh, yeah, that's good. I should try to remember that. And you're not actually letting it sink in and take advantage of it. So, yeah, I agree with you there. Do you believe that, kind of talking about education a little bit in this, do you believe that true growth happens in the classroom, or do you believe that true growth happens through those life lessons that we were talking about?
I think probably they're through the life lessons mostly. Who's to say that your education tracks that you take aren't leading you up to a position where you're going to respond to those life lessons properly or not? If you have a teacher says you need to learn to read so you can read the Bible or so you can read things that pertain to the Lord, they're giving you the tools to be able to actually take advantage of the other lessons that are coming your way. And I think they go hand in hand. So I'm trying to say that one is not exclusive of the other. They sort of go hand in hand. I do think that a lot of people run into life lessons and they are not able to profit from those life lessons because the foundation has not been set there academically for them to say, oh, that's for me. Oh, this is something important. Because I think a lot of those, what you and I are calling life lessons, when they come into the person's life, they just go right over their head without them profiting at all from it, which is sad.
Listening to one of one of the good influencers that I would say, and they were talking about college, especially nowadays. It seems like the kids they're not being able to think critically. And so one idea was that the school was teaching them what to think. And so therefore, that's why they're thinking all these more liberal ideas, because the school system now tends to be more on the liberal and less conservative side of things. And then the other idea was that schools should be teaching kids what to think at certain ages and time, so that when they get to a certain age group, and while they're teaching them what to think, they're teaching them how to think critically about those things. So then when they get to college, they've been taught certain things that they need to be taught, and then they go into college. Now, I don't necessarily agree with, either side necessarily, but the idea is maybe, schools should spend a little more time on how they critically think through processes, and kind of, I think it goes together with the life lessons, because the school hopefully gives you the tools to be able to think through the life lessons that present themselves. And then what you learn in the life lessons, school will give you opportunities to utilize those life lessons that are learned, whether it's life lessons on kindness or honesty or hard work or integrity, like all those ideals that you want in a full character. Like I said, they're probably not separate, and they probably work together, but you probably have most of the growth through outside of school. But school will give you opportunities to grow those life lessons into not just I understand it. It's now, how do I actually use it in real life scenarios?
Which is one of the reasons why, to me, education plays such a strong role in building a person's character. When you are sitting in a classroom and you're given an assignment, the person whose character is being built is going to be following that assignment so that he gets the job accomplished. And the assignment itself may be relatively meaningless as far as his interest in life is concerned. Why should he learn mathematics? Why should he learn whatever it is? And a lot of people see no value in the educational process. They just see it as something they have to go through. Anyway, that's why education is so important, because it gives you the building blocks to be able to profit from the lessons that you are learning from life. And also, it helps to bring you to a place where your life itself can be influential on other people. And some people have no interest in their life influencing other people at all. They just want to get what they can for themselves.
And these life lessons that we're talking about, I'm assuming you probably agree that they don't stop happening, and some life lessons probably happen early on, maybe from a basic level. When you're a kid, you taught, don't lie. And then as you get older, it's fleshing out, okay, what does don't lie mean? And how does it play out in a regular person's life when they're dealing with someone asking them, how do I look? Do you lie to them? Do you not lie? Like, finding, okay, how do I use my knowledge? And then as you get older, figuring out what that means in an actual human being's life. And I feel like a lot of those tend to be fleshed out in college. And for a lot of people, especially for men, I think the maturing age is what they say. It takes longer for men to mature. So, and I have the statistic in front of me, but I remember seeing it for women, it was a shorter range. They matured earlier, and men matured later in life. So finding that period of time for finalizing their life's philosophy, most of the time they're figuring it out, at least from my little bit of research, that they're finding it between the ages of, maybe 24, 22 to like 30 or so. And during that period of time, it's so crucial because they're setting the groundwork for their whole rest of their life. From your perspective, should it start earlier? Do you believe it starts earlier? And then were there any defining moments that clarified some of those life philosophical beliefs that stand out?
I don't look at anything from a certain standpoint like that. I don't see that there's a certain time period. I think the lessons that we learn when the circumstance is right. And in the classroom, you're being prepared to be able to analyze situations and determine as best you can what things you think are right and what are wrong, so that when the lesson comes down the road, you can say, oh, that's important. That's something I need to have in my character. That's something I want to be able to perfect. That's something I want to be a part of my lifestyle. A person who's brought up, what we say, flippantly or without having any real sincere desire to profit from education, most of that is when the real life lesson comes, they're not ready to benefit from it. And it passes over them. And some folks live their whole life, I think, without ever coming to a realization of what life was really meant to be for them. I don't know if that really answers your question much, but
yeah, a little bit. Do you believe that teaching or coaching has shaped or changed any of your previously held beliefs? Like maybe something that you didn't realize that maybe you believed, you realized that, okay, I need to change this because of a situation that you had from coaching a team or teaching or
I think it has. I've loved the teaching. I've loved the coaching. I think they both have their own place. And I think in the doing the teaching and the coaching that I have profited from that quite a bit, which is why we've stayed with the teaching and coaching so long. Here we are in our 80s now, and we're still hanging on to the fact that we've learned things that we would like to pass on to people who would profit from it. We're also frustrated by the fact that the more we seem to press that, the less attention seems to be paid to us in the process. When people get to be old, people say, well, they're old, their ideas are all trash, so they're not important to me anymore. So unfortunately, youth has always seemed to ignore experience and age, and we've seen that more and more as we get older. And I don't think it's ever going to improve.
Do you think that do you think there's any truth to that statement? Like, do you believe that all your ideas are better than young people's ideas? Or do you believe
ideas, not necessarily skills and successful processes? Yes, I think that both Carmen and I have developed tools that help us to carry on with our lives in a more successful way than we have seen a lot of young people in their lives. And I'm saying young people is that's people we run into who are a lot younger than we are. And there are things that we try to pass on to them. And again, they're polite to listen, but they're not taking advantage of anything that we say. I shouldn't say that because some things I'm sure that they would register with them.
Yeah, I'm sure there's some things, and kind of how I look at it is anytime I'm talking to you guys, I think, okay, a lot of knowledge, a lot of experience, a lot of success, in what you were doing. And so there are still things that I can learn. Now, like I can, something that I saw was talking about how if you had kids and it was like maybe the 90s or 1960s, the equivalent to having kids then, as far as like how much you would need money wise and salary wise to be able to afford having 10 kids is the equivalent to having like 2 kids today. And that's adjust for inflation, that adjusts for everything. So, for somebody that wants to have 2 kids now, back then they could have 10 kids with the same amount of money that they have today. So I believe that there are some things and some principles that probably remain the same over time, but I think that there are different ways of going about those principles that I think make it harder. Because even buying a house now, I know you guys have looked at buying houses and you buy houses and rent them. Even a house over here that you guys just purchased, small house, but finding a house like that in Houston, would be unheard of. Like that same house there, would probably be almost double of what it is over there. So, and I know that's not the same everywhere, but it's hard sometimes at least for me to hear, like we have it very easy. When I see certain things, I'm like, it doesn't seem easy to me. Based on what it says, it's not easy. And then, and even technology in general has made a lot of things easier. And I brought up the AI stuff and ChatGPT, and I think there's stuff there that are very helpful in just life now, and now it's how do we adapt things like that to better our futures or careers, whatever it is. I think that a lot of people do miss out on opportunities to gain knowledge on basic principles of life and philosophy and the core beliefs that have made people successful for years, I don't think they've really changed. I think it's just the process of how you use those principles change over time, at least from my perspective.
You're probably right about a lot of that. Just how that's going to be useful to you and or your ministry, so to speak, in the future is hard to tell right now. But even what you're doing here with your podcast program, I think it's probably going to be a step in the right direction, because you're bringing out things to make people, or to help people think about the direction they're heading and the importance of paying attention to some of these things.
I hope so, and I hope that it helps a lot of people, and even if it helps one or two, I think that'll be good for me. But something I think kind of hit home as we were talking yesterday about kind of what a young man or young family's role is within their community, and what should that look like. Let's just say someone just moved into a new neighborhood. What does that picture look like? Young family just moved into a new neighborhood.
A lot depends on their background and what they're there for and the resources they have to work with. If they're going to be coming into the new neighborhood, we assume he's got a job. We assume he's got a good job. We assume he's got the resources to be able to not have to spend his whole life scrapping around to make a living. So if he's got the resources, then he tries to look at, how can I make a positive impact on my community? And one of the things that I see that I have thought was so admirable in times past has been the experiences that we've observed in the lives of our daughter and her husband, the Brinks, Deborah and Matthew Brink. Everywhere they have gone into various neighborhoods and moved into those neighborhoods, they have made friends with their neighbors. They have encouraged the neighbors to make friends with them. They have encouraged the neighbors to have neighborhood events that would draw the neighborhood together. And they have basically stimulated neighbors to actually be interested in the lives of their neighbors. I think this has been a great influence of people coming into neighborhoods, and they have done that everywhere they have gone, and they've moved frequently because of his job. So I think that's been tremendously profitable. And actually, they have done that in such a great way that has caused me to think we should have done more of that in places that we have been. Now, I think it's been a great example.
And, I remember not just in their community, but in their church too. They're always involved in doing something VBS and making huge stages and productions and stuff like that. So, yeah, I think that is a great example. And I think for a lot of people, it's, you can say, encourage them to be friends with other people, but that process, I think, has to start somewhere, right? So it's, they arrive, and as soon as they get there, they're not waiting for the neighbors to come to them. They're going to their neighbors and being willing to put themselves out there, invite them over to their house or their backyard. And so I think that's be a good challenge for a lot of young men, myself included, to kind of be even more of that community gatherer or creator, I guess you could say. So yeah, great challenge for those that are wanting to challenge themselves, for sure.
One of the things that I've tried to encourage people to do is something that I've done myself. You know about my writing Grandpa's journal, and I wrote that to try to pass on ideas that we've had, suggestions about things that we think work, tell about things that we like, things that we don't like, things that basically influence who we are and how we live. And I have encouraged a number of people that I've known to somewhere along the line get started writing their own journal, because when they go through life with all these experiences they've had, they have learned things that are going to profit other generations. But if they don't write those things down somewhere, everything they have learned along these lines dies with them when they die. There's no way to say, oh, my grandparent did this or that. And and taught this and that and so forth. But I think it needs to be written down somewhere. So I encourage people to write journals. And it doesn't all have to be done in overnight. You don't have to say, take off days, weeks, months to do it. You just sit down and get started with it and add to it as the ideas come or as time is given. But I really think it's important to do, but I don't know that I've ever talked with anybody who says, hey, I got mine started, or I'm halfway through mine. Or
do you think that nobody has because they don't think their life is worth writing down? Or what do you think is keeping them from doing it?
A lot of people say, I just don't know how to write. Never have liked writing, never have learned to write or known how to write properly. Some people say that. Other people just say, I don't have time for it. I'm too busy with my phone, my life, my extracurricular activities, my job, cleaning up around the house or whatever it is that takes the time away from what I would do to sit down and do it. But I think it's probably because they don't really see the importance of it. Yeah, I see the importance of it because I think there are so many things that so many people have learned along the way, and what they learned is lost because it's never been written down.
Yeah, I mean, it's a kind of a great jumping off point to kind of your legacy and your influence in life. And obviously Grandpa's Journal there's a lot of good stuff there, and not just for your own kids and your own grandkids, but I think a lot of people could benefit from it. Is if you could kind of narrow it down a little bit, what would be key qualities to a meaningful life?
I guess it would be to focus on things that are eternal as opposed to things that are transitional. If you're doing nothing more than mowing the grass when it gets taller, you've not really done anything to add to the life of a neighbor or a friend or a child or anything. But if you transition from doing the things that are so-called mundane and get into some of the areas of things that are lasting, you're going to make more of an impression on those who come behind you. And to me, I think the way you raise your kids, the way you explain your victories, and the way you talk about your defeats, how you would change things that you found to be a mistake or an error or something, and how you went about reconciling that. I think those are all important things that can be written down so that somebody else can come and walk in your steps without having to go through the same process and relearn everything you learned the hard way. To me, that's one of the real values in writing things down, is that you are sort of trying to pave the way for the younger generation to learn from the older generation without having to go ahead and make the same mistakes they've made all along the way.
Yeah. We were talking about, I think it was at church on Wednesday, and they were talking about God blazed a path or created a path for his. So in a lot of ways, we're called to be like Christ, and he gave lessons and paved a way. So in the same way, paving a way and writing a book, creating lessons, maybe even this podcast, creating something that will help people navigate. May not be perfect, but it'll at least help.
Exactly. Which is what, the podcast is one of the ways to do that, I think. That's great.
And now, we talked about faith for, it's come up multiple times in this. And now maybe I don't want to say more than ever, but, at this point, got a potential, you have prostate cancer. You've got a surgery or a pre-surgery appointment next week for heart surgery. As you still have asthma, it's not like it ever went away. So, you have these health issues. You have what I would call a very successful and fulfilling, meaningful life. Now, kind of looking towards your future, how does faith play a role in kind of the remaining years, hopefully, of your life?
Well, my faith has taught me trust in God. I believe that that God exists. I believe that He cares for me. I believe that He cares for you. I believe He cares for each soul. Therefore, I'm going to continue to try to do what I can to bring people closer in their walk to God and to draw closer to Him all their life. I'll do that to the best of my ability, but as you grow older, of course, your testimony and so forth becomes less and less important to people who are around you. I have no idea that that's going to be, that my continued emphasis here is going to be make any more of an impact than it has in times past. But I will not be discontinuing that. I'll still be continuing that because I think it's the right thing to do. And I hope it will be. I don't foresee that I have that many years left because I'm older and everyone's going to have to take that next step and go on to be with the Lord. I do think that as I get older, the things that I have learned have become more and more a motivating factor in what I do, where I place my energies, so to speak. And so it's less and less important for me to mow the grass than to read my Bible and to do other things that would be of more value for eternity. But you always, I think, a good statement is to live your life with eternity's values so that this, and this are going to be more helpful for the long range than this, and this. And it sort of directs the direction your life is going to go if you've got a faith-based foundation for your, I can't make that strong enough, that statement strong. You've got to have a faith-based foundation for your life.
Thank you, Grandpa. We're going to tack on one more piece to our interview. I'm going to bring in Carmen, Tutu, and I'll have a couple questions for you guys, and then that'll be it.
Before we do, let me just mention one other thing.
Yeah, please. Go ahead.
Okay. You mentioned earlier about the things I regretted. So let me just preface that by saying everyone lives their life as best they can as they're going through. And I don't think anybody gets through life without having regrets. The regrets come probably in two different areas in particular. Sometimes your regrets are in things that you did. Looking back, you say, I should not have done those things. So therefore, I regret that thing that I did that I shouldn't have done. And everybody has those kinds of regrets. You never get through life without those. Everyone. If I could go back and redo my life, there's some things that I did that I regret. And if I had it to do over again, I would never do that because I can see the harm or the damage or the hurt that has caused to me or to somebody else in times past. So yes, I regret that. The flip side of that is there is a regret for things that you should have done that you didn't do, which is just as much of the regret side on the other side of the coin as having done something you shouldn't have done, but you should have done something that you didn't do. So the regrets come from both directions. And yes, there are things that I wish, I regret that I did and shouldn't have done. But I also have regrets that I should have done things that I didn't do. And just for example, on some of those, and it's too late to do anything about it in many cases, but I have people who have influenced my life very strongly in one way or another. Teachers, preachers, friends, and they've said something or done something that has very much encouraged me or helped me in some way or another in a big way. And I didn't thank them for that or tell them how much I appreciated it. For some reason or another, they moved out of the area. I moved away from them. I didn't take the time to write a letter or a card or even a phone call. And those are regrets that I have that I should have done more in that area. If I had it to do over again, I would do it differently. So yeah, two kinds of regrets, okay? Not just one.
Do you think that those regrets that you have made you who you are today? And maybe if you did not have those regrets, things would be different? Like, do you think those regrets shaped kind of your future?
I don't know. That's hard to say. Life is life. when you have something that you regret, it's almost impossible to go back and fix it. Sometimes it is, and if it is, then it ought to be done. But even if you say it ought to be done, doesn't necessarily mean it's going to get done, because sometimes if I should have said to someone how much I appreciated them, I can't find them. Where are they? Or in one case, in case of a pastor has passed away, there's no getting back with him. Maybe one of these days when I get to heaven, I'll see him and tell him how much his ministry meant. Anyway, I don't know if that answers your question or not.
Yeah, a little bit. I think a lot of people, Nike's, whatever they call it, their slogan, just do it. I think although it's a secular, Nike's not Christian by any means, but that idea of just do it. If you think that you need to say thank you, just do it. If you think you should, I think there are a lot of things that it's that lack of decision that causes the regret. I think a lot of people that do things, I feel like people have less regret because they at least acted on something. Maybe that decision was the wrong thing, but they didn't regret that they made a decision. They may have regretted the decision they made, but they at least made a decision. I think there's a lot more people out there that have I regret that I didn't do something. I didn't invest. I didn't say thank you. I didn't apologize. Maybe I didn't defend my wife at the grocery store. Maybe, I didn't do something. I didn't stand up to that bully. I think there's a lot more of the I didn't do something than the I did something and I regretted that thing. At least that's how it feels for me. I don't know.
That makes sense. Yeah.
I know we went through a lot, and I'm sure there's still more that we could take away, but wanted to get Tutu involved for a little bit, and
see if you can twist her arm to come in.
I'm sure I can twist her arm.